Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something massive, the Manhattan Project. We've pulled together sources on the science, the sheer scale of it all, the engineering. It's kind of mind-blowing. Our goal here is sort of sift through it all, find the core nuggets, the breakthroughs that basically reshaped, well, everything. Okay, let's unpack this. The starting point, it seems, was just raw urgency, wasn't it? We're talking 1939. Europe's on fire with war, and there's this terrifying idea floating around. What if Hitler's scientists figured out nuclear fission first? What if they got hold of a weapon that could just wipe out a city?
That fear was absolutely central. And interestingly, the first big push didn't actually come from the military brass. It came from scientists themselves. Albert Einstein, Leo Szilárd, they saw the potential, the danger. They wrote this pretty stark letter to President Roosevelt, basically saying, look, this atomic power thing, it's real, and it could be a weapon like nothing else. And that letter, that warning, that's really what kicked off the U.S. government program, which, spiraled into this enormous top-secret operation.
Right. So our deep dive today is tracing that path from a theoretical warning in a letter to, well, unleashing the atom. And to pull that off with that speed and scale, they needed a management structure unlike anything before. The sources really highlight this leadership pair at the very top, a really improbable duo.
Oh, absolutely improbable. You had, on one hand, General Leslie Groves, Army engineer, solid, gruff apparently, his big recent job, building the Pentagon. So, he understood massive logistics. He knew how to get things done, push through red tape. People described him as a bulldozer. His job was resources, speed, and crucially, secrecy.
Okay, the bulldozer. Makes sense for the scale. But it wasn't just about building things, right? There was the secrecy aspect.
Exactly. And Groves' key strategy for that, the real organizational genius here, was compartmentalization. Think about it. Hundreds of thousands of people eventually worked on this project, but only a tiny handful knew the full picture. And most workers, whether they were chemists, engineers, construction guys, they only knew their specific piece of the puzzle. The people enriching uranium didn't know why, not really. The teams building components didn't know what the final device was. It was ruthlessly efficient for security. If someone talked or defected, they couldn't give away the whole game, just their tiny part.
Wow. Okay, so that's the logistical muscle and the secrecy structure. And then, the science lead, completely different kind of person, J. Robert Oppenheimer. Brilliant physicist, yes, but described as mercurial poetic. And he'd never really managed anything remotely like this scale before, had he? How did Groves even bet on him?
It was a huge gamble. But Oppenheimer had something Groves didn't. This intense intellectual charisma. Groves could build the facilities, manage the supply chains, enforce the rules. But Oppenheimer, he could inspire the scientists. He could speak their language, bring together these, incredible minds from all over the world, many of them refugees fleeing Europe, and focus them on this single, unbelievably difficult scientific goal. So you had this dynamic. The practical, tough general making sure everything ran, and the intense theoretical physicist driving the scientific breakthroughs. It somehow worked.
That tension, that structure, it had to be strong because the physical footprint of this project was just vast. You mentioned compartmentalization. It seems like the physical locations mirrored that too. Not just one lab, but whole secret cities.
That's exactly right. They needed different places for different huge tasks. You couldn't just do it all in one spot. You needed a place for the theoretical work, the thinking. You needed places for producing the incredibly rare fuel and then putting it all together.
Okay, so let's break that down. The thinking part. That was Los Alamos, right? In New Mexico. Sort of the project's secret brain hidden up on a mesa. Our sources paint this picture of a really weird environment. All these brilliant scientists, their families too, living basically under lockdown behind barbed wire, all wrestling with these universe-altering calculations. Must have been intense.
Hugely intense. And while they were doing the theoretical heavy lifting, the industrial side was churning away elsewhere. Take Oak Ridge, Tennessee. This place basically popped up out of nowhere, became like the 5th largest city in the state almost overnight. But you wouldn't find it on any public map. Its whole purpose, enriching uranium, which is an incredibly difficult, energy-intensive process. They built these gigantic facilities, used enormous amounts of power. And the thousands of workers there, mostly young women, actually, they were just told to watch dials, flick switches, check for leaks. Most had absolutely no clue they were making fuel for a bomb.
Just doing their part, completely in the dark. Astonishing. And uranium wasn't the only fuel source they chased, was it? That leads us to Hanford in Washington state. What was happening there?
Hanford was all about plutonium, a different potential fuel for a bomb. To make plutonium, you need nuclear reactors, big ones. So they built these massive reactors along the Columbia River, and these things generated so much heat. I mean, the sources say they literally had to divert huge amounts of the river's water just to keep them cool. Again, just an incredible feat of engineering built at top speed under total secrecy.
So you've got the brain in Los Alamos, the uranium fuel from Oak Ridge, the plutonium fuel from Hanford, all this massive industrial power. But none of it would have mattered without one specific scientific confirmation first, right?
Exactly. All that effort hinged on knowing for sure that you could actually get a controlled nuclear reaction going, sustained. And that critical step, the moment the theory became demonstrably real, happened somewhere pretty unexpected.
Not in some fancy lab, but under a football stadium in Chicago.
Yeah, literally. A squash court under the stands at the University of Chicago Stagg Field. That's where Enrico Fermi, an Italian physicist who'd fled fascism, led his team. And on December 2nd, 1942, they did it. They built this thing called Chicago Pile 1, CP1, and achieved the world's first controlled, self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction.
Okay, for us non-physicists,
Yeah.
what exactly did that pile achieve? Why was controlling it the key?
Well, a chain reaction is like dominoes. One neutron hits a uranium atom, it splits, releases energy, and more neutrons. Those neutrons hit more atoms and so on. If it happens too fast, it just explodes. That's the bomb. But could you make it happen slowly, sustainably? Could you control the fire? Fermi's pile used graphite blocks as a moderator. The graphite slowed the neutrons down just enough so they were more likely to hit another uranium nucleus and keep the reaction going steadily without running away. They literally had guys standing by with cadmium rods, absorb neutrons, ready to shove them in and stop it if needed. But it worked. They proved they could start, control, and stop a nuclear chain reaction. That discovery. That meant the bomb wasn't just theory anymore. It was possible.
Wow. So that moment in the squash court, that's the pivot. Now they knew they could build it. And the focus shifts back hard to Los Alamos, right? To the engineering problem.
Yeah.
How do you weaponize this? And because they had two different fuel paths running uranium from Oak Ridge, plutonium from Hanford, they ended up with two different bomb designs.
Exactly. Two distinct paths leading to two very different devices. First, you had the uranium bomb, which they called Little Boy. This one used the highly enriched uranium from Oak Ridge. Mechanically, it was actually quite simple, often called a gun-type device. You basically have two subcritical pieces of uranium. You use a conventional explosive, like cordite, to fire one piece down a barrel into the other piece. When they slam together, they instantly form a critical mass and boom, chain reaction, nuclear explosion.
Simple.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, I guess. So critical mass is just having enough of the right stuff packed together to kick off the chain reaction.
Precisely. It's the minimum amount needed for the reaction to become self-sustaining. The big challenge with Little Boy wasn't the design's complexity. It was getting enough of that highly enriched uranium. The enrichment process at Oak Ridge was slow, painstaking work. In fact, they never even tested the Little Boy design before using it. They were that confident in the physics, but more importantly, they only had enough U-235 for one bomb by August 1945.
Okay, so that's the uranium path. But then there's the other design, the plutonium one. Fat Man. You said that was way more complex. Why?
Plutonium. It's different. It fissions much faster, and it produces more stray neutrons. If you tried the simple gun method with plutonium, the reaction would start too early before the pieces fully combined. It would fizzle, a messy radioactive pop, but not the massive explosion they needed. So for plutonium, they needed something radically different, an implosion design.
Implosion? Okay, what does that mean in this context?
It meant taking a core of plutonium, slightly less than a critical mass, and surrounding it with precisely shaped conventional explosives. Think of them like explosive lenses, designed to focus the blast wave inwards. When these explosives detonated simultaneously with incredible precision, the shock wave crushed the plutonium core, squeezed it very briefly, very violently, increasing its density until it reached critical mass. Then the nuclear chain reaction would take off properly.
That sounds incredibly difficult, getting explosives to detonate perfectly symmetrically, crushing a sphere uniformly.
It was an enormous engineering challenge, maybe the biggest technical hurdle of the whole project. You needed microsecond timing, perfect shaping of the explosive lenses, complex detonators. This is what occupied so many of the best minds at Los Alamos. Physicists, engineers, explosives experts, metallurgists working day and night. Perfecting that implosion mechanism was absolutely critical.
Right, all this effort. The secret cities, the physics breakthroughs, Fermi's pile, the gun design, the implosion nightmare. It's all building towards one single moment. The test.
Yeah.
And that moment finally arrived, July 1945, middle of the New Mexico desert, a place they codenamed Trinity. They decided to test the more complex design, the plutonium implosion bomb. They nicknamed the test device the Gadget. and they hoisted it up on a 100-foot steel tower, waiting.
Yeah, the descriptions from the sources, the tension was immense. You had scientists, military observers, all huddled in bunkers miles away. Oppenheimer was reportedly incredibly stressed, chain-smoking, barely holding it together. Then the countdown. 5:29 a.m., July 16th, 0. And it wasn't just bright, it was like a new sun ignited on Earth. Blinding, turned the pre-dawn darkness instantly into daylight. Then the shockwave hit, the ground shaking, and this terrifyingly beautiful, awful mushroom cloud starting climbing up and up into the sky.
So the test worked. The gadget, the implosion design, was a success. But reading the accounts feels like that success was instantly heavy, overshadowed.
It absolutely was. The sheer power they'd unleashed was staggering, even to them. Oppenheimer famously recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu scripture, watching that fireball rise. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. That wasn't just relief or scientific triumph. It was, I think, a profound recognition of the threshold they had just crossed. The Trinity test wasn't just the end of the Manhattan Project's development phase. It was the definitive start of the nuclear age. And that shadow, well, it's been with us ever since. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Manhattan Project, it's obviously a pivotal moment in the war, but it's more than that. It really set a template for how massive government-funded science gets done. Even today, you see its echoes. It's this incredible mix of pure scientific brilliance, huge industrial might, ambition, intense secrecy, and ultimately terrifying power. That bomb became real, and so did the responsibility, the fear that came with it. That shadow, as you said, it hasn't gone away.
So what does this all mean for you listening now? Here's something to maybe chew on. Think about the level of secrecy, the compartmentalization that General Groves needed to make this project work. The city's off the map, everyone's siloed. How did that very structure, that necessary focus on just building the thing, potentially shape the decisions made after it was built? When it came to using it, to controlling it, to the ethics, did the way it was created make it harder to grapple with the consequences? Consider how that top-down need-to-know system, built for a single urgent goal, might struggle when faced with the long-term, messy aftermath of its own success. Something to think about.